I haven't been sleeping right lately. Late at night, I've been going to meet Gabriel.
Machine, I will cut you down, break you apart, splay the gore of your profane form across the stars. I will grind you down until the very sparks cry for mercy.
I've dreaded writing this script all day. I should be excited. This is a video about two games I love, Skate Story and Ultrakill. I have the ideas, I have the angle, I just need to get the words into the computer. But my shoulders hurt, bad. My whole back is lit up with it and it's spreading. What began as a single subluxed shoulder has developed into a dense web of displaced muscles. As I write, my hand will sometimes jolt from the spasming of some distant part of my shoulder. Each one hurts, like an ice pick between the scapula and ribs wrenched out and away, fragmenting thought and movement, never obliterating either altogether, but just enough to make the somatic nervous system recoil, and, like aftershocks, command the sharp firing of already strained muscles. I can suppress the jolts, which makes it a little bit better, and even retain my normal range of motion in spite of a subluxation, but there is a price. Pushing through takes effort and attention, which impacts whatever else I'm doing. More importantly though, with a subluxed joint, I only keep my normal range of motion by putting additional load on other joints and muscles, which are, almost inevitably, injured in the process. When a body part that uses 3 muscles only has 2 to work with, there are consequences, potentially long-term ones, even when doing something as simple as playing a video game. I can't avoid this, so I've had to make it useful. It's become something of a sixth sense for me, one that, despite everything else about it, I can't help but find beautiful. This is a video about pain. Welcome to the first in a 4-part series about difficulty in video games. It was originally one video about Hollow Knight Silksong and Hades 2 because Tessa and I got mad at the latest round of difficulty discourse late last year, and then it exploded into a multi-part series because, as it turns out, there's a lot to say about difficulty. Don't worry, we'll get to those games eventually, but before then we need to lay some groundwork. The first element of difficulty that we need to talk about is probably the most fundamental and worst discussed: pain. Something that many games elicit, something that nearly all of us experience, and something that even specialized doctors struggle to precisely measure because it's so personal. Nobody knows how much pain you're in or what it's doing to you, except for you. So, it's no wonder that public discourse struggles with this. Talking about pain is hard. Like, it's extremely difficult on a technical level. It requires a precision of language we don't often afford ourselves time to develop, especially for a topic so unpleasant. It's kind of like trying to explain your dreams, deeply significant to you, but often irrelevant to others' experience of the world. When you try to express your pain and it feels like nobody understands or cares, it can be a deeply alienating experience. As a result, instead of trying to engage at the necessary level of depth to achieve understanding, we often rely on linguistic shorthand, cut conversations around pain short, or worse, don't say anything at all. All of this is especially prevalent in conversations around video games. Half of the community condescends to those who express pain, telling them to get good to make themselves feel superior, while the other half decries the existence of pain in these experiences as an unfair or even ableist failure of design. Both reactions miss the point entirely. To be clear, this isn't exclusive to games culture and journalism. For these and many other reasons, pain is just one of those things that many narrative art forms struggle to express clearly. If you've ever had any serious experience with pain, you know that, given enough of it, minutes become hours, become days. Pain warps our relationship to time, so artistic mediums that are dependent on a consistent linear relationship to time can tend to struggle with depicting it accurately. Film, for example, can't usually expand a moment of suffering out to an experientially appropriate length. The few seconds depicting on-screen suffering rarely encapsulate how the agonies the characters are experiencing obliterates their attention and, until it passes, reshapes their reality. The mediums that do excel at expressing pain, then, are those that have a more fluid relationship to the experience of time. Now, obviously, I'm a writer, so take this as you will, but in my opinion, two of the best mediums at expressing pain are poetry and prose, if for no other reason than they allow audiences to dictate the pace at which they experience suffering. Pain is also interruptive, and poetry and prose lend themselves well to interruption, relative to other artistic mediums. If you've ever read a poem written the last decade, then you know that poets love interrupting themselves. All of this is relevant today because we're talking about Skate Story and Ultrakill, two indie action games set in hell. As I've played these games over the past few months, I've realized three things. Skate Story is a piece of poetry, Ultrakill is a work of prose, and they are both very much about pain. So why do I keep playing them if they hurt so badly? We'll start with Ultrakill because Ultrakill is like prose, and prose is easier to understand than poetry, albeit a bit more dense. If it's been a minute since you studied language arts, prose is written text organized by standard grammatical rules. That's about it. You can't really give a much more specific definition than that because novelists have been doing some truly deranged things to written English over the past century or so. Here's an easy metric. Does it have paragraphs? If yes, it's probably prose. There are, of course, prose poems and other pieces of prose which reject standard grammatical convention, but most prose is defined by following most of the rules most of the time. This is what makes it so useful as a form. Because it follows the rules, when it breaks the rules, that breakage is noticeable. It means something. The specific genre of literature which Ultrakill most closely resembles is known as ergodic literature. Ergodic texts require non-trivial effort from the audience to traverse and parse, in addition to the normal work of literary interpretation. The most famous example of this is probably House of Leaves, which Ultrakill actually references a few times. Ultrakill tells its story through a mix of terminals, collectibles, and short fiction interludes, some of which are hidden behind ridiculous combat challenges. To truly understand it, the game demands your dedication. Like prose, Ultrakill is also structured into paragraphs, in the form of its levels. You get dense and weighty combat encounters that communicate massive amounts of information, intercut with brief dips in pacing and action, during which the audience is given time to process and consider what they've just learned. These levels are generally linear, albeit with some exploration and problem-solving thrown in for good measure. Depth and challenge in combat, though, is the core of the experience. Each individual encounter can be pored over, studied, refined, and eventually perfected. To reach that perfection, you have to follow the rules built into the game's scoring system, which works like those in character action games like Devil May Cry. Unique maneuvers, situations, and environmental kills have different point values, and chaining together a variety of these moves keeps your combo stylish and fresh. Here are just a few tricks that have their own bespoke point values. Projectile boosting, where you parry your own shotgun pellets to turn them into hit-scan explosives. Dunking, where you shoot a cannonball at an enemy, allow it to ricochet before grabbing it with your grappling hook. Then you parry it back into their head. Or the Ultra Ricochet, where you flip a coin into the air, swap to a hit-scan weapon, and then shoot the coin, sending it unerringly at the nearest target. You need to know how to do these tricks and follow these rules because Ultrakill is hard, and the mechanical advantages bestowed by a high style rank are all but required for overcoming the game's challenges. You can always heal off the blood spilled by enemies as long as you're close enough, but taking any damage reduces your maximum health too. Max health recovers slowly over time, with its recovery speed being dependent on your style rank. At the game's titular highest style rating, Ultrakill, your max health recovers instantly. You can take damage and always heal back to full as long as you're being sufficiently swaggy with it. The game's most stylish and powerful combos, the ones that allow you to reach and maintain an Ultrakill style rating, require swapping between the many weapons at your disposal. For example, when you eject the titular core of the core eject shotgun, and then, before it lands, swap to the malicious rail cannon and shoot that core, creating a massive explosion, that's called a core nuke. An unchained saw involves hitting an enemy with a detached, explosive-propelled chainsaw. My favorite of these tricks, though, has got to be the slab coin punch, a flashy extension of the Ultra Ricochet I mentioned earlier. You flip a coin while walking backwards to halt its momentum, then punch the coin into an enemy, swap to the slab revolver and fire a fully charged shot through the enemy into the coin where it ricochets back through that same enemy and just fucks their entire day up. It's really sick. Doing this at the beginning of a fight or in the practice arena is easy. Landing this while maintaining your style ranks, managing your health, and dodging enemy attacks is a different story altogether. Look at how many projectiles are on screen right now. How would you feel politely asking these guys to stop shooting you for a second so you can do your gay little coin trick? Do you think they're going to stop? No. They're demons and they hate you. Okay. Now, how about doing all of that with a hypermobility disorder? I deal with all of the pain I discussed at the top of this video because I have a disorder that, though currently undiagnosed because I can't afford gene testing, presents a lot like a few different subtypes of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which a few of my family members do have official diagnoses for. Basically, the collagen that makes up my connective tissue is abnormally stretchy. Instead of turning me into a superhero, it makes my joints chronically unstable. Where most people's joints are fixed hinges or ball and sockets, mine are, effectively, free-floating levers and planes of bone held together by muscle tension and little else. Normal activities like running are extremely unintuitive for my body, and have, in the past, caused me to develop a wide range of repetitive stress injuries. Properly managing this condition requires me to carefully alternate between strength training to provide muscular support to my joints and rest periods to prevent injury. It also means I have to be very careful about the things I do and the things I avoid doing. Unlike most bodies, if I ignore or move away from how mine hurts, one way or another, it will always get worse. Just while typing this draft, I dislocated my shoulder 4 times. Playing a twitch reflex shooter like Ultrakill, using the standard mouse and keyboard control scheme, running levels over and over to master them in the way that the game demands, it would basically be torture for me. So I don't. After struggling against these controls for years, I've recently transitioned to a gyroscope control variant called Flickstick. In it, the left stick controls movement, as is normal for controller shooters, but flicking the right stick to the side turns 90 degrees, and pulling it back turns 180 degrees. Precise and vertical aim is handled by the controller's internal gyroscope, which I can reset or suppress with a button press, double mapped with my punch button, which is why you'll occasionally see me randomly punch the air in these clips. It is, in my opinion, a much more intuitive control scheme than stick or mouse aiming, and it has completely revolutionized my relationship to first-person shooters. It's not that gyro controls have eliminated pain from shaping how I play. You can see momentary flare-ups throughout my Ultrakill footage as a dislocated scapula or other joint causes my hand to jolt forward, causing jitters in my aim. What it has done is make that pain more useful. While learning gyro controls, my right wrist started hurting in a new way. A sharp, deep ache inside the ulnocarpal joint. At first, I worried that I was already developing a repetitive stress injury. But instead of stopping, I kept practicing while focusing on the pain. I realized that I had only been using my right hand to aim, gripping the controller tightly and tensing my flexor carpi ulnaris, the muscle that runs down along the side of the arm and through the back of the hand. When I noticed this, I loosened the grip on my right hand and allowed it to rest in a neutral position while practicing entirely with my left hand guiding the controller. It was awkward at first, but I quickly became as proficient with my left hand as I'd been with my right. Once my right hand felt better and I could start aiming using both hands, my performance drastically improved and the pain all but evaporated. When I talk about pain being a clear signal, a sensory input, this is what I mean. Gyro aiming can take advantage of so many more muscle groups than mouse and keyboard. Wrists, arms, shoulders, my torso, even my legs and ankles if I rest the controller on my knees. That when one body part starts to hurt, I don't have to use it. I can play a sort of neuromechanical quap, conditionally activating specific muscle groups to achieve specific motions. Over time, this has become one of my body's automatic responses to pain, relaxing and redistributing tension rather than clenching in response to sudden stimuli. It's increased my proprioception, my awareness of my own body, as well as my dexterity across a wide range of muscle groups. We typically conceptualize pain as a net negative, as something that society should aim to avoid or minimize whenever possible. But I think this denies us our agency and undersells the scope of pain's role in our lives. All of these responses and improvements have been marked by an experience of pain that has been useful for me rather than destructive. It's allowed me to move through the world without hurting myself beyond repair, without causing myself suffering. And this distinction between pain and suffering is crucial to Ultrakill and the story it tells. The game's lore is overwhelmingly deep, but its basic premise is very simple. You play as V1, a robot fueled by blood that humans designed to end all war. And it worked! Hooray! But then the humans built a portal into hell, like literal biblical hell, and they all died. So now there's not much blood left for V1 and all the other robots. But while Earth may be empty, hell is now full. You can do the math. V1 is an interesting point of view character. It doesn't really have much personality, interiority, or even that unique of a perspective. Ultrakill fans lovingly call it GoPro, because that's what it effectively is. A shitty camera strapped to a vaguely humanoid form going very, very fast. Importantly, despite the fact that it's a robot, V1 does feel pain. When it dies in the game's failure state, a command line quickly flashes on screen, describing the shutdown of V1's limbic system. It tries to scream, then inputs "I don't want to die" over and over before the command line gives way to an image of a red, twin-pupiled eye. Of course, in the game's narrative, this never happens. The self-preservation instinct programmed into V1 keeps it alive and hungry as it rends its way seamlessly through layer after hellish layer. If there's anything that we, the players, inhabit, it's less V1 itself and more this impulse, directing its pain towards growth and survival. We are the desire to persist in spite of the hell that surrounds. We're also not alone in V1's head. Its point of view is a tangle of perspective, much like prose. It's sort of an inversion of one of my favorite styles of narrative prose called free indirect discourse, in which third-person writing reflects the interiority of the characters it centers. The audience has access to the character's thoughts and emotions, but only through the mediating force of the author's voice. This allows the story to take on a sort of limited omniscience. Perspective only bleeds through at the edges. By contrast, V1 is a first-person perspective through which multiple different entities parse the world. These include V1 itself, us the players embodying its pain reflex, God in his divine omnipotence, and, perhaps most importantly, hell itself. In Ultrakill, hell is much more than a place. It's a sentient being, hungry and cruel. It lives, breathes, and eats suffering. It also writes about it. In a game so full of prose, from diary entries and news reports to unreleased emails from Hell Technology PR firms, nobody writes quite like Hell. It speaks in prose poems, which are poems that follow some traditional grammatical rules like paragraph structure, but instead of doing so to communicate rhetorical information, like most prose does, prose poetry's primary goal is to produce an emotional effect in the audience.
I see, Ulysses, frozen upon the wide, dark, high sea. Eucharistic flesh and blood, born in pain. This is man. Even against the odds, writ by Adam, murder is in their nurture. The epistolary plosives of air raids, the open graves, masked corpses with claw-packed sockets, the site's rest left unseen. Insipid and insolent, him so feared as two readers cry, there will be no peace.
Occasionally, Hell speaks to V1, taunting and encouraging it to feed within its depths. But increasingly, over the course of the game, Hell's primary audience becomes clear. It's God. Its internal monologue available in its entirety only to his perfect clarity and grace.
I see to you, son of soul. Eat, yearn for more, over and over, until all that remains is the knowledge that this was all your fault.
Hell is taunting him, describing in lurid details the intricacies of the suffering it inflicts on Lucifer and the rest of God's discarded children, all because he created it in the first place. And it appears to be working. In hidden text logs found throughout the game's secret levels, we see a series of laments written by God. At first, he decries the failure of his children to do right with their free will and damns them to hell. But then, his position reverses. The Fourth Testament recounts Lucifer asking God, "Father, why eternal torment? Is it not cruel?" And God could find no answer, for he could never face the guilt of what he'd done. And in what he describes as his hour of weakness, simply for asking, God cast Lucifer too into the infernal den. God made a machine built to inflict suffering, and he hates himself for it. "I am hollow," he says in Testament 5. "My mistakes leave nothing but hate in their wake, and infinite pain to follow. I can't take any more of this guilt and regret." And so, in shame, he abandons the throne of heaven and leaves the angels to fend for themselves. In his absence, and without clear direction, the angelic council that takes his place comes to an interesting and incorrect conclusion: that God must have abandoned them not for making hell, but for having produced too lenient a suffering machine. So they decide to make it much worse, and send one of their own to get it done: the Archangel Gabriel.
I will grind you down until the very sparks fly.
We're getting into major spoilers for Ultrakill's story here. You may have noticed that I haven't called V1 the protagonist of Ultrakill. That's because V1 isn't. Gabriel is. The story of Ultrakill is that of God's will, the Archangel Gabriel, and his fall from grace. We, the player in V1, are the mechanism of that fall, the great chains which wrest him down from divinity. When V1 first enters Hell, Gabriel has been the primary executor of its order for quite some time. At the behest of the angelic council that rules over heaven in God's absence, it was Gabriel who struck down the rebel kings Minos and Sisyphus for building vast empires of the dead within their respective layers of hell that treated those dead with kindness rather than cruelty. It was Gabriel who ordered the construction of the great mechanisms of suffering which supplanted those broken kingdoms, and at the end of the game's first act, it's Gabriel who stands guard against V1 within the depths of gluttony. He warns V1 that, by trespassing, it is crossing the will of God, for which Gabriel, as the righteous hand of the Father, shall rend it apart. And then, because it's a video game, V1 absolutely obliterates Gabriel, no matter how many tries it takes the player. And that is, perhaps, the worst possible thing that can happen to Gabriel. If God's will is perfect and Gabriel as an angel a manifestation of God's will, then his defeat means one of three things: that Gabriel has fallen out of alignment with God's will, that the will of God is for a machine to strike down the second most beloved and first most loyal of his angels, or the machines have become powerful enough to reject the will of God. None of these options are good for Gabriel and the angelic council. For one of God's angels to lose to a machine is unthinkable. This defeat has made them fallible, mortal even. So, in fear and shame, the council decides that Gabriel has failed to uphold God's will and strips him of his divinity. This makes his mortality literal rather than metaphorical. He now has 24 hours to defeat V1, after which his alienation from God's light will kill him. And so, Gabriel returns to Hell to face V1 again. In the climax of Ultrakill's story to this point, level 6-2, Aesthetics of Hate. This is the moment that Gabriel truly falls. It is, as its name implies, an aesthetic exercise in violence, and it is my favorite level of a video game that I have ever played. Forlornly playing the organ in a cathedral drenched in blood-red light, the Archangel Gabriel laments.
Limbo, lust, all gone, with gluttony soon to follow. Your kind know nothing but hunger, purged all life on the upper layers, and yet they remain unsatiated. As to you, you've taken everything from me, machine, and now all that remains is perfect hatred.
And then he is balletic. Gabriel's attacks are supernaturally aggressive, almost impossible to avoid. That impossibility is the point, though. Once he enters his second phase, the slim gaps left in his offense close further, and he begins teleporting in the middle of his combos. V1 is supposed to get hit here, to hungrily claw back its health from Gabriel's divine blood. The holy messenger all but commands it.
Come on, machine! Fight me like an animal! Come get some blood!
And so we dance, the three of us, Gabriel, V1, and I. Gabriel leads, he thrusts forward, my thumbs snap to the side, and V1 dives and grinds and springs into the air. He prepares another attack, and everything slows again. Sparks fly, the path forward drawn across them like a constellation through a sea of stars. A breath, and they are frozen, V1 and Gabriel, their arms heavy in the air. And then everything happens at once. Parry slam, coin flip, flash step, punch swap, charge ping fire, and the Archangel's health vanishes in an explosive display, and V1 recovers, and the dance continues, even across deaths, descending into a fugue. I, a dozen times and more, failed to strike Gabriel down, failed to properly manifest my will through the body machine, and these failures accumulate, become real through the accretion of time. I am, unlike V1, fallible, my inability to pilot the machine, an entirely distinct issue from V1's strength relative to Gabriel. Eventually, V1 will make it through, even if the player never does. The script demands it. The player's failure then, like that of Gabriel, is instead an inevitability of design, reflective of the limits of our form relative to that of the machine. To fight Gabriel, we must embrace pain rather than avoid it. And of course V1 is willing to hurt. Why wouldn't it be? As the point of view character for our story, V1 is destined to win, just as Gabriel is destined to lose. The consequences of their sufferings are not the same. While V1's story is a hero's journey, Gabriel's is a classical tragedy, one in which we, the audience, already know the ending. Gabriel will fall. He will die. The question is how he is transformed in the descent, what he does with the fleeting mortality now inflicted upon him like a brand. In this way, our position is closer to Gabriel's than to V1's. We stand opposite one another, the machine between us like a two-way mirror, reflecting his fall onto us both. When the light on his side of the mirror dims, we will be left staring only at our own bent reflection. But before his light fades, Gabriel does something magnificent. As the fight drags on and his health dwindles, the angel's raw fury gives way to what I can only describe as, well, pleasure.
I've only known the taste of victory. But this taste is this my blood? I've never known such relief. I need some time to think. We will meet again, machine.
As Gabriel falls to V1 for the second time, he lets go of his suffering and allows his pain to change him. And then something strange happens. Gabriel leaves hell, returns to heaven, and slaughters the entirety of the Angelic Council. To call this shocking would be an understatement. Gabriel's first defeat drove him towards a hatred of V1. His second defeat has given him another thing altogether. Gabriel has developed something more than reflex from the pain which hell has inflicted upon him. Through that pain, and not in spite of it, he has found direction, a path forward with what little time he has left. And so, our picture of pain appears incomplete. Mainstream discussions of pain, particularly in video games, frequently leave out its potential as a transformative or motivational power. I get it. We don't want to celebrate or valorize our experiences of pain, but often, this extends to treating the pain itself as a point of failure. Like it's the result of bad game design or human fragility, rather than an intentional part of the experience. I think Gabriel's fall and his reaction to it suggests otherwise, but to get the fuller picture, we'll need to talk about another vision of hell: New York City. Like Ultrakill, the game Skate Story also takes place in a vision of hell loosely modeled after Dante Alighieri's Inferno. But where Ultrakill's vision of hell is a sentient, hungry maw of suffering, Skate Stories is, well, it's New York City right now. Having spent the last 5 years in New York City and New Jersey, I think I'm qualified in some small way to say that, while not literal hell, New York City is certainly very adept at extracting suffering. Frankly, a lot of the time, it sucks here, for reasons that are almost entirely unrelated to the people around you. At any given time, all of them are subject to as much suffering as you are, if not more. In Skate Story, you play as a skater with a body made of glass, who signs a contract with the devil to, among other things, eat the moon that presides over each depth of hell and prevents that depth's denizens from sleeping. The skater accomplishes this by performing trick combos on his skateboard, satisfying increasingly inane criteria before eating the moon, sleeping, and descending to the next depth. Once he eats all the moons, the devil promises the contract will be fulfilled, and the skater will be free to go. He is literally skating for his soul. This hell is more subtle, more ironic than the one in Ultrakill. Its scope is limited, its sufferings bureaucratic and personal rather than industrialized. Make no mistake though, it's still a machine of suffering, just without the spurts of gore and wailing demons. It is, to put it simply, cool hell. In these ways, like everything else in Skate Story, it couldn't be further from Ultrakill's prose-like clarity. It's poetry. Poetry works differently than prose. Unbound by standard grammatical convention or even traditional meaning altogether, poems can be kinda whatever you want them to be. This is why most poetry, by volume, is very bad. It turns out that constraints like grammar are extremely helpful for most people. We can't all be trusted with our uninhibited linguistic id. There are, of course, many genres of poems that use or build their own unique rules, which they then follow or subvert, like the prose poems we mentioned earlier. But these rules are added on rather than inherent to the form. This lack of imposed structure gives poetry different strengths from prose, which is most useful for its specificity and clarity. You learned exactly how my flick stick control scheme works because while watching this video, I described it in prose. When I pull off a combo in the footage, you can intuitively conceptualize the inputs that I'm doing and the strain being placed upon my muscles. Poetry, on the other hand, sacrifices clarity for the sake of expressivity. By stripping language down to its barest components of sound and definition, poetry leaves more room for meaning to be produced at the moment of interpretation than almost any other art form. If I had described my control scheme through poetry, most people watching probably wouldn't actually understand what I was trying to communicate. But that ambiguity and expanded interpretive possibility space would have allowed you to project your own experiences onto my words, creating an understanding that was entirely your own. This is part of what can make poems, when they work, feel so personal. It's also why they're so good at communicating pain. Skate Story operates along many of these same lines, ending up in a space more expressive than literal. The skater's progress through the world is dictated by what the game calls the devil's geometry, a spatial logic much more impressionistic than Ultrakill's logical, contiguous hell. Looming portal archways link liminal, fragmented blocks of concrete, marked with obstructions like spikes, soul filters, and constantly raging red-black flames. At first glance, the environments are easy to navigate, but the blocks of concrete jut at deceptively awkward angles. The dozens of grinding surfaces seem appealing before you realize that they hang over random holes in the concrete. At the end of a rail, you'll have to ollie or trick off the ledge and begin the highly temperamental process of chaining grinds, or else fly off the map entirely. Given the variability of trick heights, moving from ledge to ledge like this becomes much more difficult than it first appears. But Skate Story is not Ultrakill. These sequences are not directly graded. You don't unlock new tricks by clearing point thresholds, and there is no stage select. No way to replay its levels endlessly to perfect your execution. The game does not demand that you do so. You can skate by. The act of surmounting the devil's geometry and progressing from level to level isn't that difficult in and of itself, but just listen to the game's soundtrack and the ways that the sound of the board begins to punctuate its rhythms. There is an aesthetic incentive to skate beautifully. The game is offering you a palette of concrete upon which to work an art, somewhere to express yourself at speed, inviting you to obliterate yourself against it until you are exhausted. And here, this hell comes into focus. The game isn't about the world inflicting pain upon you directly. Instead, it incentivizes players to place themselves, and the skater, in positions where failure and thus suffering are likely. This is how we learn that, unlike V1, the skater is both our perspective character and our protagonist. The environment rarely reaches out to kill you. Instead, your desire to hurtle through it with grace and speed becomes the mechanism for your own destruction. It's a game about trying to be beautiful, and when you almost inevitably fail, being forced to move forward anyways. The devil of Skate Story isn't like the sentient hell of Ultrakill. He knows he doesn't need to hurt you. By giving you a board and a place to use it, he knows you do it to yourself. In this way, the experience of playing Skate Story reflects the real-world activity the game replicates. Skateboarding isn't about perfection. As a mode of transportation, it's incredibly temperamental and inefficient. But it's not about that. It's about turning the awkward relationship between human legs, a plank of wood on wheels, and gravity into a site where art may emerge. Not that I can ever ride a skateboard, of course. My connective tissue disorder makes me particularly susceptible to basically every type of injury that skateboarding can induce. If I tried to skateboard, it would probably explode all of my bones instantaneously. My weak mortal form struggles when the video game asks me to hit right trigger to kickflip, maintain the skater's balance with the left stick while he grinds a rail, ollie off it with circle, and stomp it to the ground with square while the board squirms and writhes and threatens to veer into a nearby wall. My shoulder has now dislocated 4 times while using a keyboard to write this draft. Imagine what would happen if I fell off of a skateboard at speed. It'd be really bad. But even if I never fell, even if I avoided all injury and practiced every day until I became comfortable enough to, if not attempt tricks, at least use it as a reliable method of transportation, I'd still have another problem. I might fall asleep while doing it. When I was 17, I was driving home from a robotics competition when I fell asleep. I was going around 55 miles an hour through a small wooded area outside of a nearby high school. I remember driving, and then I remember feeling my front right tire slip off the side of the road as I woke back up, a field of trees filling my vision. I slammed on my brakes, carved out a few feet of dirt, and hit a ditch. I kicked back onto the road and spun out before ending up facing the right direction in the wrong lane. I pulled into a nearby driveway, got out, and bent over and spit because I couldn't vomit. The year before, it had happened the exact same way, on the exact same road. A few days later, I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. Not a lot is known about narcolepsy, but it likely results from a deficiency of the chemical orexin, or hypocretin depending on who you ask. Orexin helps to regulate the body's level of sleep wakefulness, which is different from muscle fatigue or general ideas of tiredness. Through a variety of patient-dependent mechanisms, in my case an autoimmune response, narcoleptics lose the ability to produce or process orexin, which impacts our ability to automatically regulate our level of activity. Most famously, this can look like cataplexy, the sudden loss of muscle tension in response to strong stimuli, like a fainting goat, and sleep attacks, or sudden, overwhelming waves of excessive sleepiness. Damage to the orexin system can also prevent the body from entering a normative sleep cycle. This can result in individuals with narcolepsy experiencing fragmented bursts of deep sleep that is not at all restful. It can also give you insomnia. You don't decide when you sleep or when you wake up. It sort of just happens to you or doesn't, creating the conditions for chronic sleep deprivation and fatigue. Coupled with sleep attacks and a neurological inability to regulate one's sleep wakefulness, this can cause untreated narcoleptics to sleep upwards of 16 hours a day without any impact on our overall level of exhaustion. It is, to put it simply, excruciating. It turns life into a vague haze. In high school, I was sleeping mostly in short bursts of 15 to 90 minutes, interrupted by chores, school and work tasks, and what I like to call nightmare fugues. It was one of these nightmare fugues that caused me to try to stop sleeping entirely a few nights before the accident. You see, unlike normal sleepers who enter the deepest part of sleep, called rapid eye movement or REM, in about 90 minutes, I and other narcoleptics enter REM in under 15. This can trigger hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis, meaning they happen as you fall asleep rather than as you're waking up, which is common for most people. This might sound preferable to waking in the middle of the night to find yourself paralyzed and beset by demons from hell, but when the hallucinations are particularly troubling, it can cause me to oscillate between intense, violent nightmares and sleep paralysis. This can go on for hours at a time, with my conscious mind largely present for most of it. The blurry boundaries between REM sleep and normal perception can miswrite my dreams as memories, with my brain filling in the gaps of sensation from the visual stimuli fed to it by rapid eye movement. Dreams of turning in homework become missed assignments. Nightmares become real, remembered suffering. With bad enough dreams, I am describing hell. That night when I was 17, my brain linked the usual pins and needles sensation of sleep paralysis to a hallucination of thousands of insects crawling all over my body, that I, of course, could not swat or brush away. It made the pain I knew to be a production of my mind into something very horrifyingly real. When I finally broke through and could sit up, I was covered in sweat. I curled up in a ball for the rest of the night and didn't sleep again until my first class period the next day. So, when the skater completes depth 3 and finally gets to sleep after skating all over town to collect the devil's laundry of all things, only to awaken just as tired in depth 4, unable to sleep anymore because the cops there say he needs a sleep permit, I need you to know that I understand. I too am made of glass and cannot sleep. I am very familiar with this kind of pain, this kind of suffering. I wish that I could call it instructive, an alerting signal like the other kinds of pain I've talked about throughout this video. I wish that I could tell you the one cool trick I've learned that has allowed me to surmount it, but this agony is nothing like that. It has no meaning. It is simply destructive of my body, my mind, my life, and my time. The hardest part of narcolepsy is arguably the endless pressures it puts upon your relationship to time. If I'm too bored, I fall asleep. If I fall asleep, I have a hard time waking up. While I am asleep, I may suffer intense trauma that I have to take time recovering from once I wake up. It burns my candle at both ends, and the middle too. It is exhausting, and one day the cumulative strain will probably be the thing that kills me. Which makes it all the more frustrating that I still can't figure out how to end this fucking script. To go back to sleep in depth 4, the skater has to get permission from the all-seeing bureaucratic machine that rules over the depth. So, he has to write a plea letter. Not being great with words, he asks the nearest writer, a pigeon with a laptop in a nearby coffee shop, to help him out. But the pigeon is in hell too, so they have troubles of their own. The pigeon has writer's block. Relative to hell's other torments, this isn't too bad. The other characters even say as much, and yet, it's the thing keeping them, and now the skater, stuck here in hell, unable to go to sleep. The suffering of writer's block is twofold. First, I am a writer. Writing is how I satisfy my creative impulses. Not being able to do so deals exceptional damage to my sense of self and identity. Secondly, if I don't put this video out right now, I will run out of money to live. To maintain my quality of life and personal financial security, I have to write or I will die. The emotional stress of this, amplified by my self-doubts, is immense. Language is the primary mediator between me and the rest of the world. Most people arrange thoughts into words and sentences to describe how we feel and better approximate our deeper impulses. But I have a virtually constant internal monologue and a bad habit of extensively scripting interpersonal exchanges. The breakdown in my ability to produce language represents a total collapse of how I interface with the world, a sort of cognitive alienation. When this happens for hours on end in the middle of a drafting process, it may very well determine whether or not I get to keep doing this as my job. I'm writing about difficulty, and I am obsessive about language. It can't just be good enough. It has to keep me alive. It needs to be beautiful. When a sentence comes out wrong, I get a bad feeling in my jaw. I can't move on until it goes away. I roll it around in my head, fixating on the point of failure, sometimes for half an hour that I do not have. This obsession might seem obstructive, but it's also the thing that has always led me to the passages I'm proudest of having written. The language on my screen may be the current cause of my suffering, but I am a games writer. I am supposed to transmute games into language, to engage with them at a level of depth sufficient to transform the act of play into something new, something all its own. I have to be able to do this. The plea letter gets rejected, by the way. Of course it does. It isn't good enough. Could never have been good enough. A boss fight happens. And so I massage my brain with a hammer until each sentence sounds just right. I replay sequence after sequence, hoping to get clips that are sick enough to keep viewers engaged. I don't listen to the music while I record anymore, so I can better isolate the sound effects in the edit. The retina is screaming overhead. Tearing glass is drowning out the sound of my trucks grinding against the ledge as my fingers fail, and I press the buttons badly, and I fuck up, and I restart. Eventually, it becomes second nature. I see something I don't like in my play, a particularly ugly or rushed series of inputs, a line that doesn't quite resolve the way I want it to. Even before the skater hits the ground, I restart. It's no longer the game telling me that I am failing. My pain has become unmoored from the act of falling off the board or being killed by an enemy, and has instead become grounded in something else, something more personal. I am not preempting the pain of the death or the crash and avoiding it. The pain is already here. I feel like a failed thing, worthless, worse, like an open wound of the world, so desperate and hungry I am eating myself from the inside out until I am hollow and empty like a shedded shell. I am tired. I don't know how to make this work anymore, how to refine any of this aimless pain and language into a meaningful thing. I don't know how to be a meaningful thing anymore, and I want to be so badly. You don't understand how bad I want to be something, do something other than this. Once, pre-transition, I wrote, I feel like a broken bird-winged boy, and I move like dying. And I don't even feel like that anymore. I feel made for dying, a thing born to shatter against concrete. It hurts, and I'm tired, and I'm hungry, and I don't have any fucking money, and I just want to go to sleep. And there's this stupid fucking document in front of me with all of these words about poetry and prose and angels and a fucking skateboard, and I'm so desperate to turn all of it into the thing that can save me, because what other choice do I have? I am not a demon, I am not a machine, I am not built to dance in hell, vast and churning and malevolent. I am as Gabriel, my limbs an obtuse geometry, devoid of grace, a body that bleeds as it is pulled apart by that which its holy host demands, the machine between us like a two-way mirror, or perhaps a prism, like a kaleidoscope, like a filter through which a world can be poured, but it hurts so much to be sifted through glass. In the absence of a shameful god, the angels dreamt a vengeant one, unsatisfied by the horrors of the suffering machine. Once, trapped dreaming darkly in the afternoon sun, I saw a fairy suspended by her wings, pinched between the fingers of a little girl. When she pulled, I felt my shoulders pop, the memory a haunting across my back, the pain like feathers, attuning me to the weight of my body, heavy against the air. I do not want to be in hell anymore. I want to get out, want to let the pain direct me, drive me, engine-like towards a distant horizon. If nothing else, let me be beautiful. Let me be a hurtling empress, a queen who reigns by falling. I want to kiss the pavement 1,000 times, adorn myself with asphalt, dot my body with flecks of onyx and ruby, little pearls of spit. I am weeping as I write this. I am tearing something out. But here it is, alive before me on my screen and on yours, an open wound blooming. I think I understand Gabriel's transformation now. In the novella Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, two men discuss philosophy while surveying the vast empire over which one of them presides. At one point, one of the men says this: "The inferno of the living is not something that will be. If there is one, it is what is already here, the inferno where we live every day, that we form by being together. There are two ways to escape suffering it. The first is easy for many. Accept the inferno and become such a part of it that you can no longer see it. The second is risky and demands constant vigilance and apprehension. Seek and learn to recognize who and what in the midst of inferno are not inferno. Then make them endure. Give them space." And it's these feelings, this recognition of the inferno that surrounds, the suffering of those within it, and the hands that brought it into being, that turn Gabriel against the council and the machines of suffering they have devised. It is these feelings which alight in him a new pain, a new hatred which drives him to seek something else, something like will in the council's blood. These are also the feelings which these games bring to life in me. When we talk about pain in games, it's normally treated as something to be avoided or even patched out. But pain is not, as some have sought to frame it, an error of design. Sometimes, when a boss fight is a little unpleasant, when it hurts, that's part of what the game is trying to communicate to us. I play these games because, despite the pain contained within, despite being about literal hell, they are not inferno. They are, instead, the products of thousands of hours of human creativity and, more importantly, of kindness, of a willingness to meet and move through pain together so that we may leave it transformed. These games understand that the pain they inflict through play can be made into something meaningful. They let me, in spite of the pain, be and make something I consider beautiful. And that is a gift, because while I may always be tired, I know I do not have to live like this. The world we live in hurts, and that hurt will change me as it does all of us. These things will always be true, but it does not have to be cruel. The machines of suffering in which I find myself, economies, societies, bureaucracies, neurologies, these are the product of human hands. They are worth escaping. But I cannot do so by escaping pain, that vital sign. Anyone who says otherwise is selling a dangerous fantasy. It must be treated, instead, as it truly is, an alerting signal, one that drives us towards swift and necessary action. As for how we take that action, how we overcome the cognitive hurdles to fully embody the agencies that difficult games offer us, well, we'll need another video for that. Next time, we'll dig into cognitive load in Tactics Ogre Reborn and Marathon 2026. Stay tuned, we're just getting started.
This is the last stop on this train.
Thanks so much for watching, and welcome to the beginning of Crypt Build, a more official presentation of the partnership that Tessa and I started with our Elden Ring video back in 2023. We're really glad you're here, and we're excited to show you what we've been working on. Check out our introduction video for more information on us and our approach. Liking the videos and subscribing on YouTube is always helpful, but there are two things you can do to really support us. The first is very simple. Go to patreon.com/cryptbuild and give us whatever amount of money you feel comfortable. This project is now my primary source of income and one of Tessa's as well. To start, every dollar goes towards making sure we can afford basic necessities and keep doing great work. Once we're sustainable, we'll level up our production quality with better gear, studio space, etc. We also have some really cool ideas planned for stretch goals, but we'll hold off on talking about those until they're a little bit more feasible. Again, that's patreon.com/cryptbuild. The other way to support us, and this is the fun one, is to have conversations with people in your life about the ideas in this video. Find a friend or a Discord or a Reddit thread and have a conversation about your experiences with games and pain. If I see people having good conversations about their experiences of pain, even if it's someone telling me I'm wrong beautifully and with conviction, I'll be more than happy. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon. Now I look like Dracula. Idiot girl tried to move her camera and then she looked like Dracula.